Hi, my name is Jane Scarf, and I'm coming to you from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And I want to talk to you today about forced quarantine, specifically government use of police to quarantine people who they suspect have COVID 19. First, I want to start by reading a piece from the Emergencies Act, the Federal Emergency Act, and it says, "And whereas the Governor in Council, in taking such special temporary measures, would be subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Canadian Bill of Rights, and must have regard to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, particularly with respect to those fundamental rights that are not to be limited or abridged even in a national emergency." Pretty strong words. So, unfortunately, with the charter, it's got a flaw. And the flaw is that it allows the government to override your rights. And then you have to go to court later to make a case in front of a judge that your rights are infringed. And then it's debatable, right? So this is a big flaw. It says in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 1, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So it's debatable. And fortunately, we also have the Bill of Rights, which obligates the federal government and therefore obligates all level of police. So that's municipal, provincial, and federal police. They're all federally regulated because policing is an exclusively federal responsibility. Now, the province can administer policing, but the overriding regulatory factors are federal. And so in the Bill of Rights, this is what they're obligated to respect. A, number 1A, the right of the individual to life, liberty, and security of the person, and enjoyment of property, and the right not to be deprived thereof except by due process of law. And B, the right of the individual to equality before the law and the protection of the law. C, right of religion. D, right, freedom of speech. E, freedom of assembly and association. And F, freedom of the press. And there's also legal rights that, if you're being arrested and so on. I won't go through those today because really we're looking at the fundamental rights in regard to the quarantine. So Section 2 says, every law of Canada shall, unless it is expressly declared by an act of the Parliament of Canada that it shall operate notwithstanding the Bill of Rights, be so construed and applied as not to abrogate, abridge, or infringe, or to authorize the abrogation, abridgment, or infringement of any of the rights or freedoms herein recognized and declared. So currently there's no such act of federal parliament that allows them to override our rights for any of the COVID measures, and that would be any COVID measures that are federal, like the quarantine stuff, or the provincial restrictions on business and crowds and masking and all that stuff is all provincial. So so for the use of police, they can't use police for the federal quarantining or for the provincial, well, in Ontario it's the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act or the Reopening of Ontario Act. Any of the provisions in there, they can't use police to enforce them because of the Bill of Rights, because it would be an infringement. and there's no federal okay for them to do it. In fact, as I read with the Emergency Act, it's prohibiting them even in a declared emergency. So that's pretty strong. That's a pretty strong provision, and it also applies to prohibiting police from shutting your business with the COVID measures, or using police to close your church or to shut down your protest. It applies equally to all of those issues. So quarantine, closing your business, closing your church, or shutting your protest. So I recommend that you take a copy of the Bill of Rights. You can Google it. You can get download a really nice copy, this fancy copy, or they'll send you. I ordered a stack of them for free, or you can just get the written one like this, and you can get it instantly. So it's section 1, section 2. Not a lot of reading. You can print it off, take it with you. It's only one page. You can take this one with you. It's like literally one page, and your rights are just this part here and here. So it's not much to have on hand. And then you can have the section of the Emergency Act stating that, like for quarantine especially, you can have that section that prohibits them from violating the Canadian Bill of Rights for quarantine. So if you're going on vacation, you can come back and say no. And you may like want to voluntarily quarantine, but they can't force you. And for those people who are concerned that if there is a very serious disease, and we know, like the government knows for sure that that person has the disease and it's going to cause serious harm to others, like the Ebola, it was something like a 50% death rate for people who got it. So that's like really serious. They can deal with that. There's provision through the criminal code that they can deal with that, because they would have proof that you're infectious. And then, so if you're not quarantining, then you're risking other people. But that doesn't apply to the COVID, because they can't prove the person has it. It's like a really hairy-fairy test. The PCR test is considered to be, of little or no use in terms of determining if somebody has COVID for sure or not. So they can't be just going around arresting everybody that has a positive PCR test, no symptoms, it's just not possible. And it's not a super deadly disease anyways. It's equal to the flu. So it wouldn't fly in terms of criminal activity. But just rest assured that the Bill of Rights doesn't mean that, somebody can go around with it and making people drop dead as they proceed. We can deal with that. So that's my thoughts for the day. And oh, one more thing. We have just started to officially use this in Ontario. They're planning to do, actually I have a copy of it, just a second. Businesses are going to reopen on February 11th, in spite of whether the emergency measures are lifted or not, and people are some people are going to put this sign on their door. I guess you can't read it that way, but it says, "Notice to the police officers for business owners opening contrary to the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, EMPCA, Canadian Bill of Rights, pursuant to the operation of the business, and who expect a fine, but please refrain from using force when applying these regulations." Businesses will accept the fines and allow the court to determine whether these emergency measures are legitimate or not pursuant to the EMCPA. The Canadian Bill of Rights, Section 1, still active and constitutionally binding, require the federally regulated police not to allow a government to override specific citizens' rights in Section 1 of the bill in order to shut down someone's business, and they must fully respect rights and freedoms delineated in the bill, as there is no such act of federal parliament as required under Section 2 of the bill. So this is notice to the police that they're not to, gallop in and smash the business down. They don't have any legal right to do so.